Now, is Robert Kiyosaki a fraud, or is his advice very useful? Now, a lot of people have asked me that question, and I'm going to try to be objective today. And it's a wider issue, this, because a lot of people have asked me about other social media influencers, whether that's Tai Lopez or whatever. And the reality is there are certain good things and bad things about Kiyosaki, I think. Now, number one, when it comes to the good things, whatever you think about him, he is definitely a world-class marketer. Because let's put it this way, his book is the most widely read and widely sold book in the world. And he's not a Buffett, he's not a Lynch, he's not a George Soros. And that tells you something important. He is world-class at marketing himself. And if it was that easy, then why wouldn't everyone do it? And number two, it does tell you something very important. People want to be entertained as well as get knowledge, right? Because if people are just after knowledge, then some kind of world-class academic with a PhD in portfolio theory, just looking at things in a very dry way, would be the number one bestseller. Even Warren Buffett's book would be the number one bestseller. But according to Amazon, it's Rich Dad, Poor Dad. However, in his book, as many people have said, including some of the critiques I've put below, there's a lot of misleading information and sometimes false information. For example, he talks about gold being a good investment, and gold hasn't been a good investment long term. Moreover, if you just look at some of his videos randomly from, say, could be 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, you'll find he makes many outrageous predictions for marketing reasons, some of which, of course, numbers game will be true, but many of which are actually not true. And what's interesting is I notice a clear difference here. I find that whereas someone like Buffett is respected amongst people regardless of their nationality and their economic status, you find that someone like Kiyosaki, especially his organization, which is doing training, it does tend to prey on some of the more vulnerable people in society. So for example, his training institute, it gets salespeople to go on free courses, and they get people in who are often struggling in life, and basically the sales trainer will say something like, here's the formula, blah, blah, blah. And in reality, most people who go to those kind of things are struggling in life. So in some ways, the way the whole Rich Dad franchise has actually kind of got bigger and bigger since the initial book came into being has had some negative influences. So I don't think the initial book was bad at all. It had some good things, it had some bad things, and he clearly is a good writer, or whoever wrote it for him was a good writer. But when it comes to the franchise itself, there's some question marks there for sure. And a lot of people have also questioned how his businesses have been operating in terms of if all of his claims are true. But what is very interesting about this, and this is a key mistake people make regardless of whether it's Kiyosaki or another social media influencer, the biggest mistake I think people make is what's called social proof. Now, many charlatans, and I'm not saying Kiyosaki is a charlatan necessarily, but many charlatans, basically they use social proof to get more traction. And it works like this, basically. Let's say someone makes some money. Could be 100 grand, 200 grand, whatever it is. Reinvest that money into a flash car or whatever it is. And then do some videos in that flash car and say, oh, look at me, I can afford this flash car. And people who tend to be struggling in life are reassured by that. But actually, what you'll actually find is that people who have any kind of means whatsoever, even people who are comfortably middle class, never mind people who are wealthy, are actually not reassured at all by that. I'm not saying every wealthy person is like Mark Zuckerberg and goes around with a t-shirt and shorts and whatever. But in general, people who have means are actually reassured by someone who's authentic. Like for me, even for me, if somebody approached me on LinkedIn wearing a t-shirt and shorts and even had Dorito stains on them, I'd be much more reassured, by that. I have a no ties rule. If somebody's wearing a tie and they send me a LinkedIn request, I just don't want to know, right? And it's just because we've seen that before, that kind of corporate stuff. And I'm not implying that everyone who has a fancy car or a limousine or, goes in a private jet, whatever, is a charlatan. But all I am saying is we can take advantage as human beings of people's naivety. And whilst most people are fundamentally good and most people don't try to take advantage of others, some social media influencers do use that social proof for cynical ways. In comparison, and I'm going to talk about this in my next video, there are some very authentic social media influencers who don't try to impress other people, who are not flash, who are relatively humble. And those kind of people, as a broad generalization, are much more trustworthy. Because if somebody has just got their iPhone out, they've got a cheap t-shirt, whatever, they're not trying to impress you. If somebody's trying to impress you, boasting about their net wealth or something like that, usually that's a bad sign. So that's something that goes beyond Kiyosaki or any individual social media follower. For me personally, if I'm watching YouTube, I'll always be open-minded, but I would far prefer to see somebody who's just authentic, they've got their iPhone out or whatever other phone they're using, because I've seen the facts and I've read the facts inside out. You can see it in Millionaire Next Door, The Next Millionaire Next Door, or more dry academic work. The facts are quite clear. As a broad generalization, wealthy people are actually relatively frugal. That doesn't mean 100% of wealthy people are. But in general, and I've seen it when it comes to my own network, whether that's my friends, associates, clients, or anyone else, people who show off, in general, they can be high income, but a lot of them are either just show-offs who are buying it on debt, or they're high income and low wealth. Most of the wealthy people I know, you would never guess in a million years they're wealthy. So anyone who's trying to show off, either it can be a sign that they're just very young and insecure, but sometimes it can also be a sign that they're a bit of a charlatan and they're trying to impress you, and that's always a bad sign.